No. It's the Meg-John and Justin
podcast. Yay!
Welcome, dear listener. If this is the first time you've heard us, we are, as you've just heard, Meg-John and Justin. We do podcasts about sex and relationships and our relationship to ourselves, and it's pretty broad. So we're often talking about things like neoliberalism and trauma and anger.
Mostly relating to our relationships with ourselves and others, and sex and gender and stuff. I just wanted to check, you said it's recording, but usually it tells me that Zoom is recording and I can't see a thing. I just wanted to double check that that's definitely happening. Sorry.
Yeah, it is happening. It is.
Okay, cool.
At the top left, it's saying it's recording.
Yeah, I'm not getting that for some reason, but that's cool.
So as you might have heard, dear listener, we're doing these on just audio on soundcloud.com/Meg-John and Justin. But also, if you head over to our website where you can read an excellent blog that MJ's going to write. That is consensual. I've not just nominated to the right.
No, that's how we do, isn't it? You do the tech and I do the blog post, and we both do a bit of Twitters.
It's worth flagging up actually is that we're producing so much content, and I think it's fucking brilliant content. Sorry for swearing.
Yay!
So we've got these. So with every podcast, MJ writes a blog, which is not a transcription of the podcast. It's a really well thought through article about where we got to in the podcast. It's like, it's like absolutely. So some people do come to our website to read the articles and like, well, I don't really like podcasts, but I've got this brilliant article now. So and then also. For those of you who want to see us and see the chemistry between us, we're recording our Zooms and we're putting them on YouTube. So you are getting, dear listener, a podcast, which people love, a brilliant blog post, and video of us chatting as well, for free.
All of it. Yes.
But you could also get it for non-free by becoming
for non-free. For very little, for $1 a month.
It's not free, and it's from $1 a month. So if people want to give us more than $1 a month,
$500 a month would be absolutely fine.
So basically, we are trying to make this a gig. At the moment, it's still in the hobby end of things. We want this to be like paid work, because this is what we do.
A gig, yes. Mm-hmm.
So we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Meg-John and Justin. Every other show, every other blog, every other video is just for patrons. So there's lots of stuff that you've been missing out on if you really want our stuff. So that's us.
Like anger and solo sex.
Trust, that was a good one.
Trust, really good. Yeah. So some corkers over there. Anyway, this is our freebie.
We mean trust as in TRUST, not
because we could do the other kind.
TRUSSED, which we are going to do at some point.
Kink 101 is coming, but we haven't done it yet.
We're going to talk about kink a little bit today, aren't we?
We will be talking a bit about kink, because we're talking about the TV show Normal People today.
Normal People. I've not read the book. Have you read the book, Andrew?
No, have I. I got the book, and then I saw that the TV show came out, and I went for that instead.
So
we're going to talk about the TV show. We're not going to talk about the book.
Yeah, and we're going to talk
the
about
author was
Go on.
The author was involved with the TV show, I noticed,
right.
though. So yeah, it's quite close, presumably, to the book.
From people who have read the book, it does sound pretty close. There's a lot more backstory in some elements of it, but the general I'm not going to bring in any of the backstory, but the general vibe is the TV show. Now, I've already written a sex and relationships education guide to this at my website for young people, Bish.
It's really good. Not just for young people. It's excellent.
Yeah, it's aimed at I wrote it aimed at over 16s, this one, who might be interested in thinking a bit more deeply about the show. But yeah, it's not just for young people. But that's who I write for, and that's at BishUK.com, and that's on the homepage at the moment. But we want to do our really deep dive for our audience. So we go into some detail and depth with our stuff, don't we?
Yeah. And I guess it will be spoilery. So if you've not seen it, maybe go watch it and then listen to this.
Yeah.
I think I would recommend it. I felt I felt a lot of strong feelings about ambivalent, isn't it? When you feel love and hate, it's like, I felt strongly about it. I think it is worth the watch and a real think about. And that's not to say it's good about everything by any manner of means, but
No.
there's some really strong, interesting stuff. I guess it raises a lot that's really interesting to think about and talk about.
I would say that I really enjoyed it, but I could not stop thinking about work. Like, it was just
that was it for you.
thinking about I'm thinking about all these issues to me is work. Like, I try to not think about these issues all the time. You know, I like to watch sport of professional cycling and drink beer. And
we're quite different. I like everything to involve this stuff, but for me it was an emotional workout. It felt very emotionally relevant. Like it brought up a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's not an easy watch. It's difficult.
No.
Like, some of it's really, really difficult. And I think I don't think they're really, I think if you were to watch it on iPlayer, which is how we watched it, I don't think they're really giving you very many content warnings, but
it really needs them. I mean,
so.
and content warning here, you know, so there's definitely kind of bullying, there's physical and emotional abuse, there's self-harm, there's troubling relationships, sex that's probably on the non-consensual end of things. Yeah,
definitely.
All that stuff.
There is all that stuff, and it's a big show, and so we want to talk about it. And I think for all of that, we've talked about other shows before, but this is like, I feel like this is the show that is so in our wheelhouse. That we're gonna go deep.
Let's go deep.
So but also, if you don't want to watch the show, you might find this podcast valuable because of the stuff that we're talking about. Anyway.
I think so. Particularly perhaps the stuff around our early lives and how they impact our relationships later on, I think is kind of a key theme here. And we're definitely going to look at some intersections around gender and class, and some of the erasure around race in there and sexuality. So all of that stuff. A lot about fitting and misfitting as well, and belonging, I think, is likely to come up. So if you're interested in those themes, regardless of whether you've watched the show, you might find it interesting.
Yeah. So would you be able to lead us so we're going off your notes this time, MJ, so if you could guide us through the notes this time, and
I shall. Yes.
Be the driver for the which one we're at this time. Yeah. That will only work on video, but if
sorry, I was just pretending to drive, which is kind of appropriate because you often see the two characters in the show driving together.
So I looked at where Sligo was on the map, and how you get there, and it's quicker to drive than to get there by public transport. Like the trains in Ireland seem to be terrible, so there is a lot of driving, and it takes about 2.5 hours, I think, from looking up on Google Maps, to drive from Dublin to Sligo, which is where they're driving to and from.
Which is some meaningful conversations I had on that drive sometimes. Should I just say what broad brushstrokes for people who haven't watched it? Then we're talking about two characters who grow up in this small town in Ireland, Sligo. There's the guy is Connell and the lass is Marianne, and we really see them through a trajectory in their lives that takes us from the sort of the end of school, the last year of school, all the way through to a few years into university, towards the end of university, right? And they both go to the same school, and then they go to the same university, which is Trinity in Dublin. And I guess a key feature is that school, Marianne is deeply unpopular, and then at university, Connell struggles to fit. So it's like in their school years, Connell really fits and Marianne really struggles to fit, and then it's kind of situation reversed once they get to university. And we can talk a bit about why that is, and we see both their kind of home lives and their school lives, and they have a sexual relationship when they're in school together, which is kept secret, and then they continue to kind of dip in and out of having a partner type relationship at university. They both see other people sometimes, and then sometimes they're together, right?
Oh boy, is it a sexual relationship. There is so much sex in the show.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of sex in the show. Yeah.
I would say too much personally, but
Hmm.
maybe we can get to that.
You can wonder what it is, you know, why it is. It felt a little, yeah. Well, let's get to that.
The sex is doing the storytelling, isn't it? That's the thing. So we have to, yeah. So we have to like read into the different meanings for the sex that they're having at the various different times.
Yeah, I guess how connected they are is really depicted through sex, and how connected they are to other people, how they relate to themselves. It's really, we see that in the sex scenes a lot, right?
Should also say that the photography and the soundtrack do a lot of work in telling the story as well. It's really beautiful. Like, it's
absolutely stunning.
The show is incredibly well done. No matter what you think of the story or the issues it raises. Okay, so where should we start, MJ?
Well, I think for me, there's something, you know, so I've read, I haven't read a lot of criticism of the show, but I've read some criticisms of the show, and I want to be able to hold like what's good about it and what's not. But for me, what felt incredibly powerful, and is why it's like the redeeming feature that will stay with me, is the way it depicted some aspects of experience that were personally like similar to my experience, which I don't think I'd ever seen depicted. So I think this depiction of being the girl in school who's considered ugly and treated as a kind of pariah by everybody was something that I went through at middle school rather than upper school. And to see that depicted so compassionately, and to be treated as a real thing that could have this sort of lasting damage on a person, that felt big to me. Like, I don't think I've seen that before. And that felt really big. And sort of Connell's sort of gaslighting around it as well, that the guy who's in the same school who's actually having quite an okay time kind of minimizes and denies her experience and acts like it's okay really, and she should just understand that it's just the lads messing around with her when they're calling her ugly and things. Like, again, I had experience of guys I went to the same school with who did have an okay time at that school, like struggling to hear that I didn't have an okay time and maybe that they were part of it. That really helped me to kind of locate the shame around that time in my life in them rather than in me, recognizing, you know, because you could see what Connell was doing, that he was like, he just didn't want to see that his mates were atrocious, you know, behaving, you know, in incredibly awful ways. So yeah, all of that felt like really valuable, and it just made me think about the power of fiction to depict things, you know, how we can then feel better in ourselves when we see something in fiction that's part of our lived experience.
It's really powerful. The thing that I really got from those opening episodes is how horrible school is sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the times for a lot of people. And that some of this kind of behavior, some of the kind of the bullying, the sexual harassment, and just the stuff that is baking in trauma for so many people for the rest of their lives is seen as kind of like a rite of passage. It's seen as like this kind of thing that you have to grin and bear your way through. And sadly, the stats, if I don't have the stats to hand, but the stats for sexual harassment in UK schools and sexual assaults in UK schools, it's horrendous.
It's completely normalized. It's completely normalized. Yeah. And girls are placed in that awful double bind that we see her in, which is where, you know, to have any acceptance is you have to be sexually harassed and assaulted, you know, and we see her struggling with that, like, to be accepted, to fit in, she's got to take it. That's awful. No, I think we take the most vulnerable human beings, the youngest human beings, and put them in what is effectively prison. You know, and it's grim. And I really loved how she challenged that. She was like to one teacher, you know, I don't have to be here, you know. As somebody, like, that's where I parted company from her in terms of my lived experience, because I never challenged that shit. I tried to fit in, and like I know, to see her sort of just calling attention to how just because the school system works that way doesn't mean it's okay. You know, her treatment was just not okay. And I guess we see her grapple with it because in some ways she's trying to fit and trying to be okay. And in some ways she just can't allow that because she can just see how not okay it is. I would like to see a lot more criticizing that whole system and how normalized bullying is. Yeah.
Just to say about, just to pick up on that point, any teachers listening to this who are thinking about, so in the UK we have to, from technically from September, but who knows, the pandemic is possibly putting everything back, but we don't know. But from the next academic year, schools in the UK are going to have to do relationships and sex education. It's very complicated. I won't go into it. But the more important thing is to deal with this, like to deal with what's happening in the corridors, what's happening in the toilets, what's happening at playgrounds. Like, deal with that. It doesn't matter what you're doing in the classroom. Your RSE could be amazing in the classroom, but if you're not dealing with this stuff, your school's damaging kids around their relationships themselves, each other, and sex in ways that you will never be able to undo in your classroom.
Absolutely.
Never. That's where.
Speaking as a 45-year-old who's still trying to undo this damage, yes,
exactly.
This is what you do. You set people. It sets you up for a lifetime of having to undo the damage. You have to undo the damage before you get to start on life. That's not okay. Yeah.
So
completely.
focus on that first. We call it the whole school approach, but people don't really take that seriously, and people put the lesson plans above everything else. But please do that.
I think just thinking about if this was happened to an adult in a workplace, it would be disciplinary. It would be hate crime in some case. It's just
called the union.
and I know that these things do happen in workplaces as well and go unspoken. So it's not just school, but I think there's more in place to help adults who go through this stuff. And when it's kids, it's like just seen as part and parcel. And again, that's you get that real sense of how what's happening at school. There's no way to go to home and say this is happening and get treated well. And I think one of your favorite characters, Connell's mum, is really the only adult who goes like, this is just not okay.
No,
she's gold. I just want her like in my life. She's just amazing.
Really I didn't see myself being written in this. My experience at school, I wasn't friends with Connell. I could name the people in my school who were like Connell and his friends. I can picture them right now. I was with the kind of the quiet, more indie kids. We were probably doing versions of this in our own kind of circles, but in kind of, I guess, our world was much smaller in that way. So that certainly I wasn't having sex while I was at school. But I think this bigger thing about how institutions and organisations are doing a number on everyone. It's something that comes out in normal people, but it's also something that comes out in our work. And it's not something people pay enough attention to. And again, I think one of the criticisms that I've read that I did agree with was, which we'll come to later on, is the individualisation of problems. With Connell, and how the focus is on how individuals are navigating problems that are entirely created outside of them.
That's right.
At institutional and societal level.
You can look at Connell, and then again, he does later on look at himself back then and see himself as a coward, and he should have been more courageous. He should have stood up to her, because he keeps their relationship a secret because he's worried about what his mates will think, effectively, because she's seen as this ugly girl. But yeah, you're quite right. And even his mum, is kind of like, you need to sort it out, mate. But there is that thing of like, how easy is that to do, to go against the whole totally accepted school system? And that's where the theme of normal people really comes in, I suppose, that sense of normativity. Normativity is all about fitting in. And, as queer theory kind of says, it's incredibly hard to resist normativity. Like, it gets kind of put in us, we internalize it.
Could I talk a little bit here about masculinity as well?
Please, yeah.
But it really fits in with the idea of, interestingly, the one of the leading theorists and researchers on young masculinities is someone called Connell, isn't it?
Oh yeah, Raywin Connell. Yeah.
Awesome. But the theory of masculine hegemony, so the messages about what it is to be a man, that was the thing that certainly at school Connell was really struggling with, because it was like, you're meant to be sporty, you're meant to be into shagging, you're meant to take the piss, and you're meant to be tough and hard, and you're not meant to talk about your feelings. I talk about it in terms of the masculinity donut, that there are formed masculinities that form the dough of the donut, and then there is the jam of the donut, which is feelings and stuff you're not meant to talk about. And rule number one of Masculinity Club is that you don't release your jam, and you create more and more dough to protect your jam from spilling out.
Yeah.
More about that on my website. But then there was that really, the bit that really got to me there was when it was revealed to him by his friends that his friend, that they all knew that him and Marianne.
They knew all along. We didn't have to keep it secret.
You had these opportunities to talk about it, and there were opportunities for him to talk about it, but he couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So that kind of the cultural messages around masculinity, we're doing a number on Connell, but they're also doing it. Obviously, they're then going on to do a number on everyone else that Connell meets. It's like it becomes. It becomes this just. It is toxic. It just affects everyone around him, and that was also happening
and it's not stated, but it is the worst of the bullies is the one who ends up killing himself. So you know that there is that sense of how that kind of masculinity has presumably really done a number on that guy as well. And it makes it hard, you know, in all kinds of other ways as well. He's not really, you know, it's really hard for him to be a guy who studies and wants to do English literature, isn't it, as well? You know, it's like he can't even get in touch with what he really wants in any way because of this all the dough that's there.
Well, I guess that's where class intersects with the messages he was
so much.
Because if you're into sport and it's that sporty, it's the jock versus the nerd thing as well, isn't it? But poor lads at school are meant to be into sport and meant to be physical and tough. That's how you get status at school. But he wanted status. Well, he wanted to go to uni, do English lit. Which he did.
It was really hard for him. And I think there's something about, I've heard people talk about as well, working class guys who go to uni, working class people who go to uni. There's again a different set of sort of double binds in place, because there's almost a sense you have to reject where you've come from if you're to fit into uni, or you can keep where you came from, but always have that sense of not really fitting. It's like the worlds are so different that you're forced to kind of either do this awful thing of kind of moving away from your roots, or this awful thing of keeping hold of your roots but never really fitting into this place you're in where you want to be. Again, a kind of contradiction or conflict that doesn't necessarily happen at all for middle class people, where their roots and the university are much more in line.
Big time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether I should talk about myself here or not. No, I'm not going to, because we've got a lot of notes to get through.
We have got a lot of notes. I suppose moving it on to relationships, I think in a way what it is a depiction of the way that our roots in family and school then impact on our relationship choices. And I was trying to get this sense of this bothness, you know, of why I love it and hate it at the same time. And I said, like, on the one hand, this is what I wrote in my journal at the time. It was like, on the one hand, it's a story of so many of our lives. It's utterly beautiful and understandable and devastating on like searching for and finding and losing love. But on the other hand, it's this stupid, pointless, tragic normativity, which takes all their time and energy and emotion, where they could be loving their friends and working on their projects and collectively bonding together to address and support each other around real suffering, instead of manufacturing this kind of love between them that they spend all of their time and energy on, and, you know, getting 100%. Really emotionally distraught all the time, distracting themselves maybe from what really matters. And it's like it's both those things.
100%. That's really a thing that we talk about a lot. That who are they doing there? Are they're constantly trying to do what it is that normal people do, and then at the end they're finally unshackling themselves from the normativity script, the should script, the script of what it is that we should be doing with our lives, and think, okay, and it's almost like they can breathe and they've come up for breath, and they're like, right, well, we're gonna do us now. So the phrase you really, you know, for the first time at the end, it seems to me that they're able to appreciate their agency and to appreciate that they have some power to make decisions and a huge amount of freedom. But they never felt free in their relationship until the final 5 minutes of the film, of the show. It seems to me they never felt free, and it seems to me they never felt happy together.
No.
I've got a thing called the relationships graph, which we also have in one of our zines as well, Make Your Own Relationship User Guides. £2.50, available from our website, Meg-John.com/publications. But it seems to me that, thinking about their relationship, they never seem to be a very healthy relationship, really. I mean, they're drawn to each other, and the chemistry was there constantly, but it was never healthy because they were never allowing each other to be free, but also the normativity that they were trying to stick to never allowed them to be free. The thing that I really thought about here was when at university, their friend Peggy suggested a threesome.
Yeah, Peggy's awesome.
Love Peggy. Peggy and Lorraine and Niall. Love
I like
characters.
Joanna as well. Joanna was just this solid friend, like really great. Yeah, I mean, she was nice.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was getting sidetracked by another point in my head, but I'm coming back to the point in my head, which is when Peggy suggested a threesome, and they were just like shocked. I was like, oh, why didn't you just do that, or at least consider it? Here is like a way of, one way of doing. Clearly, it's a very, very sexual relationship, and clearly here is an opportunity to just do something else. But they both immediately shut it down without even thinking about whether this is something that they want to do. Though Marianne said that she would do that for Connell. So there was this whole consent issue going on of them both trying to be there for each other. And because that's what they were, I guess that's what they were taught. They were trying to be the ideal partner for the other person within a very constrictive normative system.
And I think that is what, the thing is, it's this number that trauma plus our cultural norms does on us, is that, the trauma that they, and it's hard to know quite what Connell's was, but I guess he lost his dad. I can't remember in what way, but he's got a single parent, right?
Yeah, and I guess
and pretty traumatic just in terms of what went on at school, even though he was the perpetrator rather than the survivor. Anyway, there's a sense that they are both carrying some trauma, right? He's certainly very anxious and then gets very depressed at one point. And when people have lost that kind of care and protection too early or haven't had it, and she certainly doesn't have it in her home situation, it's really easy to want to get it out there in some way. And I think that our culture tells us that the main out there place to get it from is a romantic relationship.
Oh, big time.
And that you really see them doing that. They've gone from that situation, and I guess especially when he gets to university, he's completely lost. And there's the sense they go to each other to give each other what they've lost or what they've lacked when they were younger. And in a way, it's a positive that they get. They only do it to the end of university, and then there's a sense that they might actually be together enough to go out into the world on their own, that they're choosing to go out into the world on their own and not keep doing it either with themselves or other people. It takes most people longer than that.
I think that with the sex, certainly, and just the way that, and this, what they're trying to give to each other, it felt like they were trying to fill up a bucket with a hole in it. It was and I think after a while they kind of realized that it wasn't going to give them what it is that they needed, but because they were just seeking everything from one thing, and it was giving them, there was the law of diminishing returns, it was giving them less and less.
They both also, sort of reach, sorry, Karen.
Go on. But also they both and also because they did have relationships with other people, they did also start to figure out what it is they actually wanted. And when they couldn't give each other what they wanted, they realized, this isn't the relationship that's going to give us everything. But to come back to your point of that, it felt like they were, I mean, the very kind of what's the word? The very basic way of looking at this, the very broad way of looking at this would be to say they were looking for their romantic relationship to replace their missing dads and Marianne's missing relationship with her brother, or decent
and mum, and anyway. And everything. Well, and both of them to be their place of belonging, right? So instead of where Marianne didn't belong in school and where Connell didn't belong in uni, again, looking to each other to fulfill all of those needs. But I think we see them both reach a rock bottom where they come back to themselves and get support from elsewhere, like Connell going to a therapist, yeah, I think that's quite pivotal, that they both reach a rock bottom where they don't turn to each other, where they do kind of find that inner resource, albeit that they become really helpful supports to each other through that process. Not necessarily in a romantic relationship at that point for Connell, but at that point they're just one support, and you really see Marianne being with Joanna at that point, and other conversations happening, and sort of falling back on work projects and other things. Yeah, it's like it really shifts from it being all encompassing, them looking after each other. Yeah.
And ultimately, again, if we just apply a relationship anarchy lens to this, if they'd have known about relationship anarchy, and that what if, the phrase that I got from your excellent book, Rewriting the Rules, what if we treat our friends like partners and our partners like friends? What I mean, maybe this was going on with Colin's relationship with Niall, and Marianne's relationships with Peggy and Joanna.
I think it was Joanna, but one of those, yeah.
But even then, there was the sense that that your best friend is never as important as the one, And it's like, we talk about this all the time, but look at the harm that it does when you put one relationship on a shelf in order to continue to keep going to this other relationship. Look at the harm it does for those friends. It does for those friends who could be having a really good relationship with, and look at the harm it does for the relationship that you're focusing on. And look at the harm it does for you. It's just
absolutely. You really see that when they're on holiday in Italy, and Marianne decides, it will be fine to just like have her friends and her partner and her ex-partner and her ex's friend all together in one house, and it's just not a good scenario for anybody. But and again, it's like there's something about the whole show though in centering Connell and Marianne so much that you do get that sense of like everybody else is just a supporting character for this so important relationship, and that's just a bit tiresome at times as well. It's just like, actually all these other people are more interesting than you guys, So
as a way, maybe if we step out of the show for 5 minutes and look at that, like it's the whenever we did a watch along of 4 Weddings and a Funeral recently, dear patrons, patrons first, but it's also on our free feed now as well.
Cool.
And in that, we were saying, God, the most boring relationship here is the one with Carrie and Charles, like the Hugh Grant and Andy McDowell. All the friends were way more interesting. And what if there was 4 Weddings and a Funeral that was about basically all the friends? And there might have been some romance in there, and there might have been some shagging in there. But if we could tell everyone's stories, it would be so much more interesting. And I feel that way about this, that there is a critique.
That's a similar vibe.
Yeah, there's a critique here about what is a romantic drama, a romantic relationship drama doing? What message does that show tell us about what it is, how we should relate to each other, what relationships matter, and how we're meant to do them? In what ways is normal people reflecting a normativity and amplifying that normativity rather than inviting us to critique it or to subvert it? I don't think it is, actually. I mean, we're doing it, but
it could have done it on the show. It could have actually kind of asked those questions.
And also, what are we doing as podcasters, constantly talking about these shows that are essentially normative? So maybe what we as podcasters should be doing is to find the shows that are not centering romantic relationships so much and talking about those.
Like, go and watch this. Yeah.
We should do that too. But I guess the issue is that the dominant culture is telling us that it's these kinds of relationships that are meant to matter. These are the ones we're meant to talk about. And what we're doing as podcasters is basically saying normativity is this, the common sense, dominant kind of thoughts around relationships are this. This is what normativity is and what we're supposed to be thinking about and doing. What we're saying is, can we not? Even though we enjoyed this, can we?
Yeah. It would be really nice to see films about friendship.
Popular films that everyone was talking about that were not about romantic relationships.
Shows. Yeah, exactly.
Which we noticed before you tweet us or send us emails. But anyway. Shall we
But
move
I
on?
think it's about about shows that get talked about everywhere, isn't it? That's the really, that's partly why we watched it, I think, and partly why I watched it anyway.
Yeah, we always talk about that.
Yeah.
When we talked about Master of None before, Aziz Ansari was involved in. Well, it turned out to be that he was abusing his position of power in TV and Hollywood and stuff. But Master of None was a show that did kind of a bit critique some of these ideas about the relationship that we're meant to be interested in. But ultimately, it did fall back to the telling the story of the romantic relationship.
So many do.
More than anything else. Where really, the really interesting episodes of Master of None were all about the relationships.
And
a lot about
absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about another show now. We've done that show. Go and listen if you want to watch Master of None and listen to us talk about it. We've done that one. Let's move on in the notes, MJ, because we're about
I think we've touched on. I think we've touched on quite a few of those actually that come next. I just wanted to mention that I think something that was helpfully depicted in those early episodes was how they have this bubble of intense connection. Like the sex between them is really great. They really mutually understand. There's a real sense they understand each other on a level they're not getting understood by anybody else. But at the same time, there's a very non-consensual dynamic between them, and Connell really is treating her like dirt at this point. And I think it's really just a good one to raise, that it's nice to see that depicted, useful to see that depicted, because I think people can really easily feel like if they've got that kind of love or that kind of sex, that means it must be a good relationship overall. And we really see that it's possible to have both in one place, like something really non-consensual going on, as well as something really good going on.
Okay, a young person Connell's age asked me once, am I in love or is it just really good sex? And I'm like, good question. I think if that was a question that they could have asked themselves, that they were having, we've a bit talked about like sexual love, and that chemistry that they had is certainly intoxicating. And there was that bit about consent where Connell said, we can stop if it's painful or whatever. It's always okay to stop. I'm like, okay, that's good. It's kind of basic still, but also like what kinds of sex were they having? It was inevitably penis and vagina sex. It was always in every single even when there was a bit of non-penis and vagina sex, it was just foreplay leading to more penis and vagina sex. So they were following a social script around what sex was, and it turned out that Marianne wanted something else. And at the first moment she asked for something else, Connell couldn't give it to her, and he wanted to give her absolutely everything apart from that. But anyway, to go back to what you were talking about, which is that to be able to have a consensual sex within a relationship that is really, really non-consensual, in the way that Marianne was being treated at school, and how he was just completely shutting off any of his emotion around her at school, and shutting off any tenderness towards her at school, really was abusive and non-consensual. And so that can happen. And so just because the sex might feel good and consensual doesn't mean the relationship is, right?
Or even that in that bubble, there was that real mutual understanding, but outside the bubble, what was happening was really not okay. And I think that's, again, I haven't seen that depicted much, that sense that you can have that sense of in the bubble it's working, but outside the bubble it's really not okay. And that people can use that sense of the goodness in the bubble to justify what else is going on and stick with it, which is what Marianne kind of does until she doesn't anymore. I
mean, what they explicitly weren't doing was having the conversation, which is talking about what kind of relationship it was and to what extent, and they were just conflating sex with love. They were having sex without without telling the world that they were having any kind of feelings, but they weren't. That doesn't mean that they were separating sex and love. They were just kind of like they were equating love with sex and sex with love, weren't they? But
with me. Sorry,
go on.
and with mutual understanding as well. I think that you would really see that at the end of the first year of uni, when they have a massive misunderstanding about, you know, they both actually want the same thing, which is to move in together, but they manage to completely misunderstand and break up with each other instead. And I think it's because they've got that bubble that they're used to feeling like we know each other inside out, that they don't realize it's still completely, they're not telepathic. You know, he really thinks he said to her, I want to move in with you, and he hasn't at all. Like, he's not said that at all. And she's got completely the wrong end of the stick. And they do that a few times, where it's like, because we feel these things for each other, or because we have this really intense sexual connection, therefore they must know what's going on in my head. And that's not the case.
Well,
and it's dangerous.
They're not talking enough about their outsides, are they? And but they're just coming from such a place of scarcity that they are not really wanting to interrogate what their actual situation is. So at that moment when Connell could have moved in with her, he didn't really just want to say, look, I'm poor, you have more resources than I do, can I move in?
Yeah.
It makes sense. Because maybe he's got like shame of being working class or poor, and couldn't say that. But also, he then later brought this up with Marianne, and Marianne was in the position of power there, where she could have seen that and offered it. And it's I guess this is where it kind of, you know, if in that bubble they were, because everything was unsaid and they're just literally going off vibes. The whole relationship is just like vibe. Like how they do consent is, well, vibes feel good. But they were kind of relying on that for everything in their relationship, and they're trying to rely on that for these really difficult conversations. And it was only later that they could articulate it. And to be fair to them,
and you're right.
You know, the young people who have had probably very poor sex and relationships education, but this is what's happening.
Absolutely. And that all of it's infused with gender, because Marianne has really learned that she needs to be something for other people in order to get love. And it's infused with class, because there is that shame and that sense of that difference between us, which he wasn't able to really bring up. And so like, again, thinking about power and how it enables or stops them being able to communicate seems really important here.
The power did kind of go backwards and forwards a lot, didn't it? But it was never as clear as one person having more power than another person.
No, and I like that.
Yeah.
I like that they both struggled with mental health, and then the gender and the class. You know, we really saw how both of those things were really massively in play for them, and really restricted them in different ways.
The thing to take away from that, though, is that you can't navigate power just from vibes. Like, you have to talk about what your privileges are and what your disprivileges are in order to be able to navigate them.
Yeah. So I suppose, maybe we could talk about the sort of kink element. That seems like another big one for us. So Marianne at one point, well, a couple of points in the show, seems to be exploring a kinky dynamic with another person, not with Connell. And it's depicted very negatively, really. It's depicted as a kind of self-harm by proxy, really, that she wants somebody to hurt her. It feels like, to me, she's able to reach this real intimacy and this real being with herself and with another person, with Connell, but somehow the sex she has with other people she can't. Maybe she dissociates a bit, and what she wants is some pain and maybe punishment to bring her back into her body, or maybe there's a sense of like she deserves it, or she wants to give herself to another person in order to feel deserving of love. There's all that kind of stuff going on there, which does go on. But I suppose my real beef with it would be, this is mostly the depiction that we see in the movies and shows of kink, that usually it's about somebody who's been abused or is struggling mentally in some way, and kink is only depicted that light, and it's only depicted as something that's bad for them. And that's really what we saw here. And it's not to say that can't be the case, but it's not necessarily any more the case than with any other kind of sex. And it would be nice to see kinky people where it's not solely related to their trauma, and it would be nice to see kink that can take people to a place of healing as well as one of harming.
100%. And that could I could imagine a storyline that had, well, there wasn't enough story, I think, in the TV show. Ultimately, it was pretty sparse. Apparently, that's a bit how it is in the book as well. But there is definitely a storyline there where Marianne finds like empowerment and nurturing through Kink. And she was choosing at the end there with Connell. Like she was asking for, topping from the bottom, and I guess she was asking Connell to do these things that Connell really didn't want to do. And so we're kind of then being asked, like, who is the normal person here? But actually, another way of framing it, just an equally valid way of framing this, would be what was going on in Connell's upbringing and in his background and his early experiences with sex, in order that he is so vanilla that he didn't want to even do that. But also, they couldn't even have a conversation about it, that, again, they were wanting to just go with vibes and not actually talk about it. But first of all, a conversation about kink shouldn't be had whilst you're having another form of sex in that way.
No.
Bringing it up in that way they could have done that a bit better. But it's just, I know the show's not about kink. It interests me why they included it at all. If it wasn't,
well, I think it would have been way better not to. I think you don't. This is where it's lazy in a way, or I have a problem with it. It's like, if you're going to depict marginalized sexuality or gender in your, if you're going to have a trans character, gay character, bi character, if you're going to depict, you need to think responsibly. Like, these are the only depictions that we have of the, there's very few depictions of anything other than this. Like, what does it mean to just add to that? And I feel like there's a few levels on which that's the case. I think people of color and race is a really similar issue. Like, you really need to think about where you're depicting people of color in your show. And it is simply not okay to have the only two black men in the show be a fascist apologist and then an abusive dom. Not okay.
It's not okay.
No, it's just simply not.
There was a black character at school who was pretty silent as well.
Very silent. Exactly. We see people in the background and you're thinking, well, if Marianne's having this experience in Sligo, what the hell's it like for the very few people of color in that school? We don't get any insight into that. And we just see, again, the black character kind of going along with the bullying. Like, would he have had a different insight given what his likely school experience was? And again, I think people of color as only being the kind of problematic exes who are sort of worse in comparison than Marianne or than Connell. Not great, so I feel like the kink, I feel like race, and I feel like smoking as well. I think it's just lazy these days to depict people as smoking all the time as if it's cool and sexy. And it really, like, the camera lingers on it. I know there's stuff in film studies or whatever about what smoking does visually or some shit like that. I don't care. Don't show everyone smoking all the time.
No.
Just
young people don't smoke that much, but I don't know.
Yeah, and what does it do to, to have this kind of cool image of them smoking all the time? Like, really? Big Tobacco funded this,
Well, with media, we can't say that that having that in media doesn't have that hypodermic effect, does it?
No.
We wouldn't say that about porn, then, would we? But it is just. But it does seem like a bit of a lazy way of having characters, like, to get characters outside of the venue, for example, to have a conversation, or to for somebody to doing something with their hands or something. It does feel a bit there's a lot of drinking as well,
that's true.
In that kind of same way, but again, it would also be tokenistic to have like a teetotaler there, not to talk about I guess in the same way that we're talking about. But certainly, I wonder whether that kink and the potential for non-monogamy with Peggy was brought in order to reflect what normal is. Like, are they trying to do that? But and that's the thing, when you bring in like a token person of color and like an underwritten kink script, that what it's doing is reinforcing the idea of default and what normal is. But I don't think that I don't think that it was written well enough, or enough attention was paid to it to really to say anything meaningful about what normal is and how normal is harmful, and actually that kink and potentially non-monogamy is not harmful. Do you know?
Well, not necessarily. Yeah. No, I agree. I don't want to see kink and non-monogamy is depicted as if they're always wonderful, because I think that's also really dangerous. And kink and poly communities have been recently having conversations about exactly this. The kind of idea that you have to present them as brilliant means that a load of Me Too garbage and even worse stuff has been going on, you know, in those communities that really needs shining a light on. And yeah, but to only have the depictions, you know, it's part of the same problem. If the only depictions are negative, then it means those communities need to present themselves as only positive in order to kind of respond to that, and that means a lot of really bad stuff does go undercover. And it's just, there's just no reason that, well, the research suggests there's no reason to think it's any worse in kink or non-monogamy as it is in monogamy or vanilla relationships.
No.
It's not necessarily better, but it's not necessarily worse. And it could be better if we weren't fighting this kind of depiction all the time, potentially, you know. Yes.
And I know that this show isn't sex education. Like, it's not formal sex education, but it is. Like, when we're in a world where people are getting so little relationships and sex education that's critical, then it really, then that is what it's doing. I actually need to pause while my battery's running out on my recorder. This is going to be good for the Zoom call. I'll keep it in for the Zoom call, but I'm going to.
All right.
So be entertaining for our Zoom. Our Zoom is NJ while I just replace my battery. That's extremely entertaining.
Right?
I'll be back in a sec.
God, do I have to give this up on my phone? Hi. Oh wow, it's really, really much more stressful to be on your own than have someone to talk to. Come back.
Sorry.
Thank goodness.
Watchers.
I only have one more thing to say anyway. So I'm going to wait.
Behind the scenes insight into how we record these things.
Seamless, right?
Yeah, we're recording simultaneously for video on podcast. So I'm going to press. So you've carried on recording on your mobile, haven't you, MJ?
I have. I fear I may have fucked up the microphones on my mobile earlier in this call, though.
Oh, okay.
I know. I'm terrible.
Well, we might have to go with.
I get them wrong, like literally every time. This time I managed to shut the window so we didn't have seagulls all the way, but I noticed one of them fell off halfway through, and I had to put it back up again, and that might.
Oh no, that'll be all right. That'll be fine.
We'll see. Okay.
Okay, I'm back recording now. Go on.
Yeah. Okay. So the final thing I want to say, I want to quote the thing that made me cry in the last episode. Connell says, "Look at me a second. No one is ever going to hurt you like that again. Everything's going to be all right, trust me, because I love you and I'm not going to let anything like that happen to you again." And that undid me completely. And I think what I loved about this, so she's called him when she's been in this abusive dynamic at home with her brother and a mum, and he's come and pulled her out of there. And so what I don't necessarily like, you know, it has to be the romantic relationship, but I do like this, that we have to open the windows on these kind of abusive dynamics that happen in homes. And that's what happens, is that she's finally able to let someone see what's happening there, and somebody's able to come and say, this is not okay. You don't do this anymore. And I did really like to see that depicted. It felt really powerful. That, you know, we need to get better at seeing when in the private sphere, in the nuclear family, in the couple, things are happening that are just not okay, just like in the school system as we started with, and, you know, be letting people know that's not okay, because they won't necessarily know, because it's all they've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, I found it really powerful that I had a lot of different thoughts and feelings around that.
Please,
because,
I want to hear them.
It is like, I'm someone who is like really critical of romantic love, you know, really one reading of that is that he's taking her away from a place of unsafety into what looks like safety, but what is he doing to make it safe? Like, what's like, as I've been saying all the way through, the only way that they've been making it safe is vibes. In what way is it safe, and in what
and is it into another private? It's like to the new privacy of the couple from the privacy of the nuclear family. It's so dangerous that things just may get repeated there. It's like, how do we open the windows on those situations and show people what's going on so that people can say this really doesn't feel okay much more widely? And I think it does sort of pay off, because she starts to then do her own work and make herself safe. But she didn't necessarily, it could be that they just got into a really messed up dynamic. We'd seen them have it before. It could have got worse and worse and got pretty bad there.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like safety is something that was really a thing that they were both wanting. Like, he was wanting to give her safety, and she was wanting to receive safety from him. Like, she's coming from a place of such deprivation of safety that anything would feel safer. So even in the earlier episodes, when she was being treated poorly by Connell at school, as his mum was pointing out, and within the bubble, it felt safe that she would take that, because she got no affection, no safety, no comfort, no nurturance at home at all. So
care and protection is a good thing. I've seen the trauma literature that described, the lack of care and the lack of protection. So she's seeking both those things from him, and when we don't get those met, that's often what we're seeking in others. So it's both that kind of loving care and also that safety and protection.
Yeah, but I think he was also kind of wanting to get that from her too. I guess there was they're both just so giving to each other, weren't they? What's the bell hooks thing it was that you often bring up here about from the book that she wrote about love?
All about love, like valuing ourselves and others equally.
Yeah, just if you can't really love someone if you love them as an object. It's
absolutely.
And that's kind of what they were doing. That they were both wanting to be a person for the other person rather than to be themselves with another person.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point that they got to. And again, I think that's a point that's something we all learn from experience. And again, Claxon, I've certainly struggled with this. I was not born a relationship anarchist, critical thinker about sex and relationships. A lot of what I've learned from you, from your
right back at you.
But I'm 44 and I'm still not getting it right. So
no, absolutely. Well, this stuff does a number on you, and the fact that you are, again, like that kind of school culture, the fact we're so immersed in it means that we have to learn it, then we have to unlearn it. The unlearning it may even be a lifelong journey, but it certainly, takes a long time. And I wish that we didn't. I guess, again, it's sort of back in a loop to what does this kind of show do, because it reinforces a lot of these things that then people have to unlearn, the hard way. And then we're still watching these kind of shows, so they're still getting reinforced, and it does a number on you. Like, even though I speak these things, sometimes I can really feel that force, that gravitational pull of like, this is how you do relationships, kind of yanking me back, even though I think about this stuff all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Going back through the notes.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Unless there was anything else you wanted to pick up on.
No. I guess there's just one other thing about the university, like talking about the institutions, that the school did a number on certainly Marianne, and then the opposite happened at university, that Connell really, really struggled at university, and apparently in the books he struggles a great deal more. And it is like, what can the university institution be doing to help working class kids in,
right?
That I think also particularly Trinity. I'm kind of reading that Trinity is like a kind of an Oxbridge kind of
it is
university. And so that comes with it a really exclusionary kind of culture, and one that he never fits into. And at no point in the show is there any inherent criticism of Trinity or middle classness that it aspires and the kind of upper middle classness that it aspires to, and also I think just Irish kind of politics and Irish culture. I know only a little about it, but I know that politically Ireland's been very has not been a left-wing place. It's not been a socialist place. All governments in Ireland have been of the right, and it is that kind of neoliberal self-made man kind of story that we're talking about with Connell, right? You know, if you work hard at school, it's a meritocracy, and if you work hard at university, you'll get on. And like, how realistic is this? And
it's
also, particularly for someone
infuriating.
who is experiencing so much outsiderness and so much, you know, how did he get to the top of his class? Is it? I mean, it reminds me of that Matt Damon film with Robin Williams. He's the maths prodigy.
Goodwill Hunting.
Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah.
It just turns out that he's got all these. That he's a mathematical genius, and he's a cleaner at the university. And so, how did Connell become this? You know, English literature.
But again, we need that critique of the system. You know, this is what infuriates me now I've left academia. Is the more and more I look back, it's like thinking about like the way he's expected to kind of produce these ideas in these tutorials, and it's, you know, like if you've got people in those groups who have literally been trained their whole life to be people pleasing, to never question authority, you've got people in that room who, if they question authority, it would maybe put them in danger, you know, in terms of class and in terms of race. And then you're putting them, it's like there's some kind of level playing field with people who've been been taught how to debate and taught that it's really good. You know, like I do these Viva examinations where people are meant to defend their work, but some of those people have literally been trained their whole life never to question authority, always to accept any critique that's made of them because it would be dangerous or just wrong otherwise. It's not a level playing field. No, and then you've got to ask, like, what's even being assessed in the exams and the essays? You know, how much is that assessment simply privilege of who's learned how to do it? You see him not knowing the rules of the game, and you see other kids knowing the rules of the game, right? It's so unequal. It's not even, you know, it's that level playing field. It's like a bloody cliff, you know.
Exactly. And it is presented like if you work hard enough and you're talented enough, you'll get there. But also just materially, he's having to work like 2 or 3 jobs. When did he have the time to do all the reading?
Materially, also in his, you know, his brain has literally been trained to do, and you know, and her brain to an extent in terms of gender. Yeah, no, it's on every level. You're expecting something nigh on impossible from people. You can't train people in one direction and then expect them to just suddenly flip in the other direction in terms of not having imposter syndrome, thinking your ideas are equally valid to other people's. You know, it's just not going to happen. No. You know, it's and I see that, like looking at academic colleagues who feels able to speak out and who doesn't, who feels confident enough to operate in that system and who's constantly questioning themselves. You know, it's not a good system.
No, and there are always more barriers for working class kids. There's always a barrier that you will reach at some point. And so you know, he won a scholarship at Trinity, which apparently in the book it made his life easier in one way but really hard in another, because he had no money and he had to always eat in when he was depressed, he had to always eat in the like refectory, which is a very posh place and very further kind of isolating and excluding. But then he also at the end got a scholarship to do creative writing in New York and stuff. And like, really, like the working class kid is so naturally brilliant apparently, despite materially being massively disadvantaged in a system that privileges middle classness and middle class thought, that he's getting all No.
When again, it's a similar critique to race, isn't it? That we only ever see the depictions of, you know, working class people and people of color who are that extraordinary, and there's that kind of expectation that you have to, you know, you should somehow be that extraordinary. Similar to the depiction about disability, like that's a classic for that. It's like you only get to be depicted as a disabled person if you're like an Olympic athlete, you know, or a total genius, or you know,
Can we talk about bodies as well? Because I think it's something we really talk
yes,
about.
please.
So Connell and Marianne the actors playing them are wonderful actors. Honestly, I think it was just the acting that really kept me in it.
I agree.
But, Connell is tall, which is a thing that it keeps coming up that he is tall. I understand that because I'm a man who's tall as well, so I understand that there is like men should look a particular way, and that there is like a thing. Anyone who's watched Love Is Blind will know that men having to be tall is a thing, which is awful. Also, he's very hench for someone who drinks so much. And he's very muscly, and Marianne is slim and very pretty, like very, very pretty. Like, she got bullied at school for not being attractive, but she's very, very, very pretty.
Well, this is where I love it and hate it at the same time, again, is this one, because I think it is really valuable to show that it actually makes no difference what a person actually looks like if they are if they're told at home and at school or one or both places that they're ugly. They will always feel ugly, and they will spend the rest of their life at war with their bodies unless they can heal that in some way, and it's going to be really hard. So that is really good to see, because that is the case, and that does make sense of why a lot of people would be frustrated and just be like, oh well, but can't you see you're gorgeous, and get on with it. That is not the case, as we know from many people with eating disorders, for example. And at the same time, what does it do that the depiction of the person who is seen as ugly is of somebody that gorgeous? It's both and.
It is. I mean, it's our bodies aren't just bodies. It's not. Our bodies are red, and it's very complicated. There's an extremely good Open University online module I did about this. Just clicked through about phenomenology and stuff. It's
I know that one. It's very good. Embodiment. Yeah.
When I was writing about how we feel about our bodies at Bish, but just in terms of like depictions and who gets to have sex and who's allowed to have sex.
We don't. Joanna is, I guess, seen. It's sort of like the tokenistic fat friend. It's sort of similarly problematic to the kind of people of color, like just friends in the background depiction. And again, we don't see her being sexual. There's even sort of when they're sitting on the swimming pool and she's covered up and Marianne isn't. It's uncomfortable what they're doing there. Yeah.
And also. The other thing I was going to say was that their bodies also perfectly map onto the gender expectations of how you're meant to look. So what if Marianne had been tall and muscly, and
he'd been small and slight? They even kind of make that thing of that the guy she's seeing, who's a real knobhead, like that he's small. Like it keeps coming up that he's short, and it's like. It's a bit like the kind of small penis thing that was pretty much the first podcast we did, right? There's something of that going on there, of like somehow, inferior. Yeah, it was a good podcast. Do go back and listen to that one. Yeah, but there's something about like small guys, isn't there? Oh, it's not okay to be small, and it's not attractive to be small if you're a guy, and that's just so sad and not true.
I mean, that stuff keeps coming up, and it's inviting us to critique it, or is it just reinforcing it? So it's weird how the normal people thing is operating in that there are characters here, I guess, trying to be normal people when they've had all of the disprivileges that mean that being normal and like having a normal, happy childhood was very difficult for Marianne, and presumably for Connell, although it's not talked about because of what happened. Where's Dad? But his mum's awesome. So, but then love Lorraine. But then we're but then there's the normal people. But then there's the normal people that we ourselves are looking at. We're just looking at very normal people doing normal things, and it's only normal people who get to have sex, and normal people have romantic relationships doing extremely normal. So we're being invited to critique it rather than it being critiqued internally, which I think is I think is one of the problems for the show. But despite all of that, I really enjoyed the show. It's but you can enjoy things and critique them. And
I think you absolutely have to. I hope that people enjoy our podcast and critique it. Like I think it's terrifying to imagine people simply accepting anything without, you know, like there's just always going to be stuff you get wrong and you don't know. And you could say that normal people is a step above quite a lot of shows, and that's frightening because of how much it's not good as well, you know. But I think it's important to have that both andness of enabling of being able to enjoy and critique together of whatever media you're consuming, like not to go so far into simply dismissing it and shaming it as having no worth, but also not to go so far into having to say it's brilliant and perfect when it clearly isn't.
Just don't tell us about your critiques of our show. You have to be gentle about that with us, because
gentle constructive criticism if you're actually dealing with the people. I mean, I guess we haven't been making this show for Sally Rooney to have a listen. Maybe being a bit more gentle if we had.
No, we're being part of the cultural phenomenon that is that a lot of people are watching normal people, and there's hot take after hot take, and we both watch this show which is all about sex and relationships, and we're doing a podcast about it. We're not, you know. I loved it. I really enjoyed watching it. It did everything, because it was it had limitations, but also it was depicting some things that I've never seen depicted that are really important, as we talked about, particularly with the school stuff, which can make it a really, really difficult watch, but an important watch. And
I'm glad I saw it, and it will stay with me.
Me too.
You know, and that quote from Connell about that I read out, you know, if you can take it out of the context of you need a romantic relationship to save you, I think it's a really good thing to say to yourself, or for other people to say to you.
It is. And I think that's the thing, that she did learn to do that for herself.
Exactly.
The other thing I was going to say about that scene was that basically, that's put an end to that then, has it? That Connell's just gone up to her brother Alan and said,
"Oh yeah,
if you ever touch her again, I'll fuck you up." And then it's like, really? And he's much taller than her brother, and it's like, so the only way to be safe is
for a man to keep you safe. Gosh,
you know, it's like
violent,
and that it works like that as well. That's not how it works. You know,
and the mum is very demonized in that, but you know, another reading of it is that she's left in an incredibly unsafe situation. You know, and was already unsafe with the father and is now unsafe with the brother. There's all kinds of stuff that could be unpacked a bit more there.
And the culture that reifies masculinity in the home, and how it's the men that have to succeed, and the women can succeed once the men have had their success first. But if the man doesn't have a success, then women not allowed to have success. And also that there are only men and women in this world, aren't there?
Yes, we didn't see much queer depiction at all. I think it would have been nice to see some queer depiction in this show. Or just queerness as a possibility of any kind, you know. So gendered, the school, right? And again, it shows, I mean, I really like to see that was a big part of that bullying system, is just how gendered it was, and what's acceptable for women in that context and what's acceptable for men was just vastly different. But I think we may have said enough about normal
let's stop
people.
talking. This is not like we were not aiming for this to be the ultimate hot take either, and it's not even a hot take. We're not really reviewing it. We're just talking about the issues it raises. So
is that a warm take?
A warm take.
Nice warm take.
You know, perfect bath temperature take. I don't want a hot bath. I just want it to be like ideal temperature for me.
Just relax into it. Our warm take for the week.
Okay, so we hope you found that useful, dear listener, and we hope that you are able to look after yourself and able to get through, stay safe in coronavirus. And we've kind of had a week off talking about coronavirus, but you know, we're watching the show in the context of coronavirus, and workers being made to go back to work where it's clearly unsafe to do so, and in the UK, and a government just seemingly not wanting to really care or have a clue what's going on. So we hope that if you are directly affected by it, that you're able to stay safe, but also that you're able to get through the general stress of living through a pandemic and living through these incredibly difficult times. We've done some podcasts about that, which you can go and look at, dealing with the stress of coronavirus and the implications for consent in the future, and loving the time of coronavirus. But yeah, it's big, and I don't think that I don't want to keep. We're not going to keep creating content that glosses over it. I guess this is like a week off for us.
Just a week off, but I think we will come back to more. I'm doing workshops with folks who are still working and really quite concerned with this kind of focus on back to normal, or pretending like it's not having any impact and just getting on with it. I think it would be great to touch on that in a podcast of just how people are not being given the time and space they need to adjust to something absolutely massive.
No, and a lot of our listeners will be going through grief as well.
Exactly.
And so that's something
everyone will, just inevitably, it's like, and there's being no time and place for grieving in this. Like, organizations are not supporting that. Media is not supporting that. Social media is encouraging everyone to like do all of these extra things on top of, Let's come back to this, Justin.
Just to say we are still, this is still very live for us. But that was our week off.
Watch some telly and talk about it.
Yeah, remember, check out the website megjohnandjustin.com/publications if you want to buy any of our zines and support the show. And also remember, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Meg-John and Justin. You can tweet us at Meg-John-Justin. And until next time.
Bye for now.
Bye. Oh no, I don't need to stop video. Wait, start video. Stop recording. Stop, there we go.